Bonjour, bonjour et merci d'être de retour avec nous pour la suite de nos échanges et de ces débats d'EUROGIP qui, on l'a vu ce matin, nous plongent dans la réalité de ce travail hybridé, de cette entreprise hybridée et des risques professionnels de leur gestion, de leur prévention pour les mois, pour les années à venir. On a vu qu'il y avait beaucoup de transformations que portait ce mode de travail hybridé, beaucoup de challenges aussi. Et puis on va voir aussi...
what's going to happen in the future years, and also lots of innovations, lots of challenges, and we're going to see that these changes also open up new opportunities and enable us to prevent and manage occupational risks in a different way, and also to reach out to new audiences, new communities. So how can we deal with this new hybrid environment? How can we use this to rethink the organization of work and risk management? I'd like to welcome Valérie DUBURCQ on stage. Valérie DUBURCQ is Director of the Transformation Program, Collective Working Practices for Orange. More than 60,000 employees for Orange switched to teleworking during the pandemic. It was really quite a feat, and you seized the opportunity to rethink the organization of work in these new, scattered, distributed, open environments. And I want also to say that you participated in this online available book, The Manufacturing of Industry and Teleworking, a very relevant book on the subject. We also have with us from Valence, Jean-Claude BLACHIER, who is head of the Moulin digital, a place located close to the TGV high-speed railway station. You accommodate a lot of self-employed people and companies, workers, and where Marjolaine DEVIC also work. Marjolaine DEVIC is Occupational Risk Prevention Intervener, and she's a former manager of a co-working space. Now, you've looked into these locations that are used by people for teleworking. We also have Erick with us. Erick has worked for more than 20 years in the industry in Switzerland, and then you joined Suva, S-U-V-A, which is the public insurance organization in Switzerland, that covers occupational risks. You're going to share with us some information on this 100% online arrangement for self-control or self-management of risks for SMEs. And then Erick LEMONNIER, who is going to give us a flavor of the bionic age. Erick LEMONNIER, you had presented Safety Force some years ago, a participative, a collaborative tool to assess risks. You work for the Eiffage group, services and infrastructure. You're going to tell us about other innovations, and in particular, a bionic glove. Now, in line with what we've looked at this morning, I'd like us to further explore the hybrid business, the hybrid company in the after coronavirus years, reinventing itself. It's asynchronous, it's distributed. However, you need to rethink the way you need to run teams and manage them. It's something you've looked at Orange. And inside this organization, you've been in charge of HR, R&D, internal transformation. You started a large project on working practices and collective working practices. Now, with the coronavirus pandemic, you emphasize this feature, and also you seize this extension of teleworking as a good opportunity to look into the collective working practices in a company, a very large company, Orange. Yes, we decided to consider this as an opportunity to take a different look at, on working practices. We've been pioneered. We've pioneered innovative working practices. In 2009, 39% of our headcounts worked in teleworking from time to time. It's now more than 50% or close to 50% of our employees who work remotely. However, we thought it was a good opportunity to revisit our system with several projects. One project based on a working group bringing together 70 managers in the group from all business lines, from different backgrounds and countries, and it gave us the possibility to realize that teleworking means a different thing, whether you are in an African country or in industrialized countries. It's more difficult in the African countries to work from home. Going to work is something which is synonymous of status. It's very different for the Nordic countries, for instance. So these 70 managers came up with their vision of remote working. We asked them what should be the place of remote working in your eyes in the coming years for Orange. And well, they explained their vision on hybrid remote working. We also worked with social partners. We brought together all our social partners in the group. Interestingly, when these 70 managers came up with proposals, and social partners also came up with very consistent proposals. We also worked with the an organization that brings together the chair of future industries with Renault and with other companies. We also capitalized on the wealth of proposals from our teams to promote guides of good practices. And finally, as mentioned in our book, you need to accompany the teleworking, and therefore you need to have digital tools such as the collaborative suite that the group now uses. So you need to find the right sort of environment and the right conditions for this work to be done remotely. You had to ramp up your digital tools. It's, of course, absolutely critical. And then you need also to know how people are going to feel and in their teleworking setting, and the managers have a crucial role to play. In your book, it's very well documented. One can see that business people find it business managers find it, top managers find it very attractive, likewise for employees. However, managers, line managers, for 1/4 of them are not in favor of teleworking. 1/3 of them, of these line managers, find themselves very much alone to cope with this new organization of work. And 1,700% was the rate of increase of the question to Googled on the web to know how you could check on your employees. So how can you deal with that? How can you avoid this sort of exaggerated control over employees from managers? What matters is to assess the maturity of the team and of the collective organization to know how they are going to cope. Some people are used to collective working and remote working, and they went through this time of teleworking much more easily than the others. These other teams, not used to teleworking, relied too heavily on the physical environment, which isn't what is conducive to collective working and to team spirit. It's why it's so important to revisit this aspect quite regularly. All it takes is a new person in the team or some rough patches in people's lives for this to be jeopardized. So you ask your managers to reinvent the collective working organization, indeed, and we came up with a toolbox with some e-learning films, but also a methodology that can help them to put the right sort of questions on remote working. Also to be able to wonder or to ponder these issues together as a group, and also come up with rituals to emphasize the collective working practice, like it can be a web coffee break. For some people it works fine, for others would rather do something else to foster the collective spirit. But it's up to managers to implement the sort of rituals that best suit people on their team. You see, the company should set up the large or the general framework, and then it's up to managers to do what they have to do with their teams. Now, things are different when you don't go to the office regularly because you get in contact with others. So how can you reinvent these new offices? Are you going to use open space configuration or smaller offices? For those people who can't bear to work at home, well, it all depends. You see, I think you should come up with a diversity of offerings so that each and every one can find what they need. And also, you need to accompany all these people for them to pinpoint exactly what they need. I think we all know that some people were not who were not at ease with these regular contacts, who worked very well from home, others who do depend on social contacts to facilitate that work. So you need, each and every one needs to ponder what you need. It's not something that we tend to do. You tend to separate the emotional from the professional. However, it's important to ask the right questions. When should we meet physically, to do what and where? And if you want to organize brainstorming and you use this sort of configuration, a U-shape table, you can rest assured that creativity is not going to be fostered. So if you want to stimulate creativity, there should be a space without any tables that should be very much open. Now, the prevention experts should be involved, but how can they get involved and decipher the very weak signals if they are not physically present? Now, we expect these preventers to help us to identify weak signals, which is more difficult when you work remotely. It's also more difficult for managers to adapt themselves to the wide variety of profiles in their teams. So it's up to the prevention expert to guide managers, and there's also the impact on the cognitive workload in the long term, switching from physical presence and also meeting remotely, and you juggle between your mobile phone and your computer and what have you. It's a huge workload. It's a huge mental workload. We all know that you should leave 15 minutes between each meeting. However, bad habits die hard, and you tend to go for meetings back to back. So I think we need to remain aware of that and not get distracted by our daily routine, and still make sure that we pay attention to this. And this is exactly what we were saying this morning. We need a new doctrine.
Now we have hybrid companies or hybridized companies, and tomorrow we could call them the extended company. That is, they're going to be working with all types of spaces where people co-work that sometimes are called the Fab Labs. We have the self-employed, we have the teleworkers who work wherever they want, either closed space or open space. And they come from time to time, sometimes regularly, sometimes it's not the case, it's not regularly. It's the case at Le Moulin Digital. That's Jean-Claude Blachier who created that, and I think it's been 8 years. You have a local association that helps in the deployment of strategic strategies for the SMEs and SMBs in the region. And you developed this Moulin Digital, the digital windmill, and people come and go, more or less. That is, in the past 3 years, you've opened your arms to the self-employed, coaches, and even a psychologist and startups. And a psychologist who works there sometimes, we're going to see some images. And in the meantime, I'd like to say, how would you define the Moulin Digital, and what are the rules that apply? What are the rules that apply for people? Well, this place of ours is based on the fact that there's different places. There's home, there's where you work, and then there's a third venue or place where people do different things, or both things. So it's in between the workplace and home. The idea, therefore, is to create this new venue, this new place where people work and feel good. As you can see on the images, There are all types of things, pleasant things, good coffee, and all types of things. People could play ping pong, why not? But anyway, it's not our case, but the place is a good place where people feel good. And it's all about diversity. There are open spaces as well. It's more economical, and also it's more pleasant to work with other workers and employees. And we have smaller offices, as you can see here on the photo.
Alors chez nous, on a choisi de ne pas, c'est pas les demandes qui manquent, mais on a choisi de ne pas le faire justement pour qu'il y ait du...
And nobody works there like forever. No, even though people are asking for that, but we've decided not to do that. We want a turnover of people. We want people to change. We want people to meet there. That's the whole point, which is what we're missing when we work from home. That is, as we said earlier on, what matters is the social dimension when people meet others. There's the moment when you work, you're doing your own thing, and then there are moments when you have to have a cup of coffee or meet somebody else, someone who works in a different environment, and then have a little chat, exchange business cards or exchange services, and get to know other professionals. These third places, when they started, were really the places for the self-employed, the independent workers. They would find the equivalent of an office. And due to the pandemic, many teleworkers have decided to go there as well, either because they're fed up with working from home or because they want to be in this space, which is in between the office and working from home. There are business agreements that work with organizations such as yours, or for people with difficulties. It's a solution as well for them. It's another option. Now that the pandemic is going down, do you talk to people about your digital initiative, and what are the concrete and practical results? Well, we anticipated that, not the virus, but we knew beforehand that co-working and telework would change, would be different. And with the Ministry of the Cohesion of Territories and with the local authorities and governments, we filed a case, a dossier, because our objective was to develop and promote telework for the employees who worked for companies. We were the best bidders, and what we told companies we could do is that we could co-finance, or even fully finance, these positions, if you will, in this co-working space, so that finance wouldn't be an obstacle. We were trying things out. We were trying to see the difference it would make for people who would either work before from home or at the office. We wanted to make the most of the two other spaces. So we pooled together more or less 40 companies to try and find the best solution. And I was almost certain that this would be a major hit and others would follow us. But it was a flop to start with. There was not much appetite for our project, I must say. But then with that, we drew the lessons from that. And it was not as appealing as what we thought initially. We discovered lots of things, and we worked with the partners from France Sérieux and others to look at things from a distance, to understand what was happening. And we found the obstacles that Valérie mentioned for Orange. That is, the question about management was very much valid. And I'm an engineer. I've managed many teams. And I've never seen such thing as remote management. It's not something that you can ad-lib on. That was the first obstacle. The other obstacle was finance. because companies say, okay, these employees will be working from home, so zero expense for me, more or less. This is what companies think sometimes, whereas this time they have to rent our premises. Of course, we have Wi-Fi connection, we have a second screen, we have coffee, we have lots of friendly places, but why would I invest for my employee? That's the second obstacle. And also, there's something else, which is in these third places, people are not welcome on an equal footing. We open our doors to businesses, you see, but that means that the working conditions should be compliant with the law, to start with. We need to welcome people correctly. We need a nice working environment, good chairs, and a friendly office. Sounds obvious, but not that simple. So you've decided to work on that to improve the work environment and in the light of health and safety at work. And for that, you've been working with Marjolaine. She's a great help. She uses these third places like Le Moulin Digital, and Marjolaine also managed in Valence for 2 years a third place. And you also represent staff. You know what professional or vocational risks mean. You work on that for some local companies in your region. And you've worked with Mr. Blachier since your objective was to grow awareness about the Moulin Digital and the other third places in a place called Sédille. My question has to do with awareness and health and safety at work, ergonomics. How is ergonomics seen in these places, third places, and how did you get started? Well, to talk about user-friendliness and ergonomy and health and safety at work, these third places didn't know much about this, whereas nowadays these third places that have been here for a while are usually associations, and these associations said we could create this place for everybody. And they started almost from scratch with their own existing resources. So Sédille was set up. Sédille is the venue to coordinate these third places. Now that we have Sédille, we have this venue, this place. Well, we know from experience what others have done. We know which space has done what. We can benchmark our practices. When I started working on these projects, and that was in 2020, telework was something dear to my heart, because the co-working space I was in charge of and managing was a place where I saw teleworkers coming without telling their bosses. They had to escape from home. It was so much of a burden for them. They were working at home with the children and whatnot. Even though normally telework is not at home with your wife, kids and dogs, but it weighed on many employees. So for us, it was an important initiative. And as Jean-Claude said, teleworking in a third place is something that had started before 2020, before the pandemic. So the pandemic was like a new trigger for us, a green light, so as to roll out our plans. But in our region of the Drôme region, we'd already started working on teleworking and these third places. So we looked at possible obstacles, the best practices here and there. And everybody gained more knowledge, accrued knowledge. Okay, some had never worked in companies. They were working in other environments where there was no mention of user-friendliness or ergonomics, which means that we've all worked on these issues. And therefore, when the deployment of telework was a flop initially, we thought, okay, if we want to have quality telework, we want to find these third places which would meet health and safety objectives that the employers are thinking about, because this is like a commitment from the employer vis-à-vis the employees, either at home or in these places, because they're in charge of protecting their employees physically and mentally. So that's the first requirement that we had to meet. Well, it's totally different from the normal office, but we thought, okay, what can we do with these third places? What do we have? We organized quality audits and we looked at our resources, who had the right chairs that could be adjusted, who's got fiber connection or high-speed internet, safe networks, who has what service, so that teleworkers are well equipped with all that they need. That was the first thing, the stock taking. And then I suppose from that, you decided to purchase as a group. Yeah, that's what we're good at Cedille. Because we've taken stock of the situation and we know that some of these places didn't have the right chairs, or they had old chairs. So we decided to buy together, to invest in these third places, so that each third place could improve, could catch up, and could come up with quality working environments for teleworkers. Okay, for the time being, this is regional, but later on, this could be perhaps labeled or certified. You could think about this to attract more companies, I suppose. So this means that you can reach out to new audiences, and that's interesting in teleworking. There's another thing that's important, is that companies are changing radically, and there's something else we mentioned this morning, is the artisans, the crafts, and there have been awful changes in the recent months, and as Marc said this morning, Marc Malenfer said this morning, the idea is to rethink accompaniment or support measures. We'll talk about this with the two Ericks. We'll start with our Swiss Erick ROCHAT. He's worked in the industry for a while. Now he supports the Swiss Suva. You're in charge of lots of sectors, incineration, aeronautics, and wood-making industry. We'll be talking about this. Could you perhaps very quickly talk about the main thrusts at Suva? Certainly. Well, the law in Switzerland is such that if you think that your company has special risks, you have to get an insurance or cover from Suva. You will see what this means in a minute. You will see what the law looks like. As far as our work program is concerned, we have to prevent accidents, vocational diseases, and health and safety at work. There's another task, which is that of an insurance company, and the third task, which is rehabilitation, so that people go back to work after an accident. We have other work streams, or rather, we have no shareholders. Suva reuses all of its profit if we have a surplus. That means a decreased premium for all the insured, all the people covered. And what's also special about Suva is that we have a board of directors with all the social partners and also the confederation. From the confederation, the Swiss Confederation, which means that we're open-minded. We can work in a very pragmatic way. Well, let's have a look at this innovative tool that you've been using in the past 3 years. That's self-control. This is something you've done in some sectors. 50%, 70% of the employees, little by little, are covered. Each year, You have 9,000 new companies that you choose, which are screened. By that I mean a self-evaluation of vocational risks. We're going to look at this questionnaire, but first, are there any specific company profiles that you're targeting? And why do you want to do things 100% digital for companies that don't use digital technologies? As I said earlier on, what's good about Suva is that we have companies that are covered by Suva, so we know what the statistics look like. We have statistical data sets. So we can rate, I don't like the word rating, but we can rate companies, those that have more accidents than others. Like any prevention body, we go and visit the companies where there are more risks, or more accidents, sorry, which is quite logical. And we've realized that we've not therefore visited companies that didn't have many accidents, or the SMEs. Therefore, the objective in self-control or self-assessment is to have a reminder shot, if I can say, an extra shot. That's an expression that everybody knows, which is not perhaps the right expression, but at least people will know how to best manage safety at work. It's a self-check with a maximum of 10 questions, so that companies can answer these questions in, let's say, 30 minutes, and then they'll see if they need to investigate this and that, if they need to ask more questions. We want to hit as many people as we can without disturbing companies, because usually companies don't have much time looking for documents. Could we have a look at this self-check test? It really is something that's well designed. Correct, that's the first page. Bottom left, what you have is a hyperlink. As you can see, suva.ch/autocontrol. You can have a look at this later on, but you know, the companies get the paper documents, a letter, that is, in which they're told that they were chosen for this autocontrol, this self-check, and that these companies will be using their IT technology. There are one or two questions to start with. There's a situation that's presented with some information, and the company will say, okay, that's good for me, that's covered, I know how to manage this case, or no, I've not covered that case, I don't know. Or also, the company can say, this never happens in my company. It might happen. We cover so many companies, you see. And then, if they say no, companies, in any case for us, will have to do something, will have to react. And then you have extra information at the bottom of the page. That's a link that companies can click on to look for more information. These are direct hyperlinks. And then on the following page, it all depends on the first answer. In this case, the company says, no, we're not covering that point. We're not managing that point. Well, they receive what you can see on the page. That is a whole set of measures that they have to roll out. And then, after that, they get another message, and the message says, here's, in a nutshell, what you are doing. And you have 2 months or 3 months to fix that so that you are compliant, so that you catch up, and so that you can finish the task. It's as simple as that. We want to cover as many companies as we can. This is a reminder shot, if I can say, and at least companies focus on what's important for them in their industry and in their professional area. Okay, next year you're going to cover different themes. Now we have a question online. The question is, you've said 9,000 companies. How do you choose these companies? Is it in a random fashion or not?
So the least prone to accidents and usually SMEs. That's the first selection, shortlisting, and then any company may apply to take part in this program, but initially we focus on SMEs that are not so accident prone. Now, what about those companies that are
not happy and say that the self-check on the internet doesn't work, etc., etc. Well, the first feedback we had, quite interestingly, is that we say it's a good surprise to some of them, as we say in Switzerland. You know, once they've started, they realize that there is a lot of information, quite interesting things to be collected, and also it speaks to their environment, to their occupational world. I have tested it myself, and I must say it was crystal clear, very accurate, and guidelines and recommendations are coming up naturally. It's this Swiss clockwork, as we say. Well, it's true that the feedback is very positive, and then you asked me about those companies that are illiterate, let's say, with computers or not comfortable with IT. Well, you have typically those companies that are saying, well, we don't have any computers. Then we make the survey by phone call, and we send them a hard copy of the self-check paper. And others are just asking us to go and visit their premises, and we talk about occupational safety and health. And that's also a way to reach them out and to make them more interested in this. And quite surprisingly, it does work. If you consider industries that already have a corporate safety culture, usually they fill out the self-check questionnaire very easily. And now we're sending it out to small municipalities in Switzerland, and we're quite surprised to have so many of them calling us and asking for us to visit them. It really is a door opener, a wonderful idea. I think that many ideas would be very happy to have many Swiss companies in their portfolio. Then, okay, there is a pinch of salt to that. It's about the response rate. 45% of those companies said, we have no problem with safety and health at work. Are we so sure? I'm not so sure. Statistically, we've realized that when we revisited some companies, it was sometimes very good and sometimes not so good. Typically, for instance, you have those companies when you open the door and you see, wow, it looks great. You see that there is a safety culture in the place. It's something tangible. And these companies still think that they have some areas for improvement, while you have other companies where you open the door and you're not so happy, and those are the ones telling you that they have no problems. So it's worth having a look after that, after the survey. But it really is a door opener, and is a way for companies to become aware of this. We'll try and see how we can innovate with these new tools, and we'll move from digital to bionic. You've presented this great tool that you have at Eiffage. It's a bionic tool that you've developed with a Swedish company to alleviate the burden and the load carrying for your employees. How is it that you've come to this solution, which is an exoskeleton, which sounds a bit far-fetched in the future? Well, it all started from a very pragmatic observation. The hands and the wrist are the limbs that are under the greatest stress, particularly in the construction sector. So that's the first observation, the first finding. And then in France, 40% of musculoskeletal disorder are located in the upper limb, wrist and hand. There was a study in Germany which did quantify the consequences of musculoskeletal disorders for the society, and it involves a 30 billion euro loss in productivity. So those are the findings that are paving the way for research and that are needing further research. And at Eiffage, we wanted to go beyond what had already been done over the last decades on automation, and the changes that were brought to the construction sites. And we've talked about ergonomics earlier, and we've also said, well, let's have a look at what could the exoskeleton bring to our employees, because this is what we would like to find out. What is the benefit for our operators to reduce stress, which is still very present in our activities, improve the workstations of operators, and also hopefully preserve their health. And interestingly, it is a flexible exoskeleton. It's a glove that you can see here on the slide with artificial muscles. It's not a big exoskeleton that you have to carry along. It was initially designed for medical purposes. It was for rehab programs for people who had hand-related diseases. So you've discovered this medical innovation and you thought, well, maybe this could be also useful as a prevention tool at work. And it was done with the same Swedish startup company. Indeed, we had the opportunity to meet BioServo. They had developed this technology. You see the picture here on the right of the slide, and it was in a rehab program. It's a medical prosthesis for those people who could no longer handle and had lost the motor function of their hands after a stroke. So initially it is for treatment purposes, and at Eiffage we thought, well, maybe this could be used at work and maybe use it as a prevention tool to prevent the onset of musculoskeletal disorders and to preserve the motor function of hands and fingers. So that was the baseline. We've worked on that with more than 100 employees at Eiffage who got involved in designing this project, both managers and operators. It was an iterative process. Workbench first, and as soon as an improvement or an add-on was brought to the prototype, we applied it on site, and we expected then the feedback from the operators who were making suggestions and proposals to improve further this globe, and we will see the improvement that it has brought. It has helped reduce the stress and effort by up to 80%, because it's not for a one-off operation, it's because of repetitive actions throughout the day, and the repetition of this physical effort will be alleviated thanks to this tool. So, once you have it, how is it used actually on site? For which workstations? What are the repetitive tasks that will be using this tool? So you have to program your worksite and your schedule as per the number of tasks to be performed. Well, indeed, Régis, it is highly flexible. It doesn't contain any metal, so it will certainly not hamper the hand mobility and the work of an operator. And it's a huge advantage because at the end of the day, it can be used in any work environment, be it the construction sector or other industries. And you've rightly said that the handling has to be a repetitive type of action because this is where you will be alleviating the effort. If the operator is having an action that will last only for 10 or 15 minutes, it's of no benefit. Now, if it is a repetitive action, you can reduce the effort by 85%. And I must say that the acceptance of this equipment by operator is very easily measured. You just see the smile on their faces. They're so happy. They do not have to make such a huge effort. So it's very simple. It's just as simple as that. The deployment plan is quite original. You've done that via Loxam, which is a company, a rental company, renting construction equipment. So why did you rely on a subcontractor for this project? Well, it is in line with our values. Our intention was to make this equipment accessible to the whole community, and not only to Eiffage workers, to all construction companies, regardless of their size, and also to individuals. Because an innovation is meaningful only when it is shared by many people, but it's very expensive. It's 8,000 to 10,000 euros if you want to buy it. Absolutely, it is expensive indeed. There are many embedded technologies involved in this bionic glove, so it makes it an expensive equipment. So we wanted to make it more affordable. So we started with BioCervo for the design of this glove, and then we met with Loxam. That was our second fortune, because we presented this project to Loxam, which is a well-known company in France and in other European markets. We didn't know whether there was a market for this tool, and they were kind enough to come on board this journey. And we started in the second half of 2019, and since 2019 it has been on the market in France and in Europe. And since Eiffage is a very innovative company, we will also see another example of innovation, which is called Darwin. It's a robot that is also used for haulage of heavy and cumbersome items. We have a few images. I'm lost. And it can be connected, controlled by remotely with a joystick, or there is a face recognition system where the robot will select his master and will follow the master wherever he goes. How is it deployed and how is it used? He looks friendly, doesn't he? A cute robot. So, Darwin is a project which is under development with a French company called Beau Robo. The starting point, just like with the bionic glove, is that we want to prevent risks. The ultimate objective of risk prevention, occupational risk prevention, is to make work more comfortable for people, to bring more benefits to workers. Maybe not well-being, but at least some improvement in their working conditions. And we've realized that some loads, such as tools and pieces of equipment, as a cumulative weight will be around 50 kilograms. And over a long working day, it's a lot to be carried by operators. It can be done by each and every one of us from time to time, but not every day over a 35 years career in construction companies. So the idea is that this robot will carry all these pieces of equipment that are under 50 kilograms altogether, and this robot should be able to move around in a construction site, so it's a never-changing environment. It's not always flat. There are slopes and there are holes on the way, so these robots can climb upstairs even. Now, how do you identify the new problems that may be raised by these exoskeletons or these new vehicles? Well, typically we do monitor these fast-changing technologies, but the difficulty there is that there are many startups around, and for those companies that are involved in these projects, we have started some partnerships with engineers and ergonomics specialists, so as to make sure that this new piece of equipment, innovative piece of equipment, will not be causing problems. And then we have a few partnerships with cutting-edge businesses. So we'll keep in touch then. So it's quite an interesting business you have. You visit businesses, you discover robots, exoskeletons, but it means that you have new players in the world of risk prevention in the construction centers. So it's a new area. You have 3D printing, you have drones, etc. Well, indeed, it broadens the horizons, not only for preventionists and OSH specialists. It's also interesting for the whole company, because it's not only a few people within the company that will discover and design these projects. They might be the pioneers in the project, but it will be then bought in by all the employees of the company. There is some eagerness amongst the employees of the group to help their occupation develop and grow, because this is not a sector that is enjoying a great reputation in terms of innovation. We're known for innovation in our products, but there's a need for innovation for this equipment, and our employees are eager to take part in these projects, and this is what is going to happen in this decade. It's going to change our daily lives regardless of the industry. Increasingly, there will be technologies that are only incipient today. Now, and also they're taking pride in taking part in such innovative projects. We are proud about it at Eiffage, but we've been proud about it only recently. You start with a rehab medical prosthesis, which is designed for people with disabilities, which will be used for people who do not have any disabilities. And more than that, NASA has announced in January that they will be using these bionic gloves for the next Artemis project to the moon. So we've done some extraordinary work. Now, there are a few questions that we've received online for Valérie. A question to Valérie: what is the attitude or behavior that Orange can have when it comes to these third locations and the problem of awareness raising on health and safety at work?
This is something which is complementary, interesting for large companies. Even if you have a lot of real estate, there are always areas where you are not present. And it's interesting to come up with a complementary services offering. Now, in the past, these places were not always sufficiently well equipped, and it's important to refurbish them and make sure that they are properly installed. We tested this out with some of our employees. Maybe there's something else we must do because we know that our employees, when they go to work, they want to meet with people, they want to be in a nice environment. So if there's not enough on offer, they may feel too much isolated. So it's important to have this co-construction of the place, of the venue, and make sure that it is attractive. There's yet another question to you. What sort of actions are undertaken in order to help managers, because these managers have a huge workload. So how do you avoid putting too much on their shoulders? Yes, indeed, and it means that managers should also realize that they have to delegate some of their tasks and also rely on the team instead of trying and managing everything himself or herself. Co-development and sharing is something that help us to promote this sort of organization, facilitating sharing across various organizations inside Orange, but also with Renault, with Française des Jeux. All of them have the same sort of issues. And now you told me that you're also trying to revisit this the remote working teams with the HR departments. Yes, indeed, and not only the HR, it could be the preventers or facilitators. All we want is to make sure that managers work in a network with other people, with other colleagues to address these issues. Right, over to Switzerland now. What sort of what is your headcount to implement this auto-control, this self-administered control? It's online, so I imagine fewer people. Well, I don't have this at my fingertips, but I think it's 10 people. They run the automated or semi-automated side of the system. And as soon as there are questions, well, we direct them to the various experts. But I'd say some 10 people. And yet another question, what sort of topics are you going to deal with in the future years? Because you were telling us that you're going to focus on different themes. Well, we are going to focus on Suva 1 Plus. It's a project we have, starting with UVs and sunscreens. Probably something on asbestos, also noise level. These themes are currently being worked on. Now, of course, sun protection is something which is very important, which is the first one we want to wrap up because the summer is just a few months ahead. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you very much to both of you over there in Valence, and thank you very much to our three speakers. We'll make sure to visit your place in Valence and enjoy your nice cups of coffee. Now, a short pause, and then we meet again for the next discussions of our day.
Oui, on va commencer tout de suite. Alors voilà, on a
Starting right away.
C'est le live. On va tout de suite débuter avec une séquence pour essayer de voir comment justement la stratégie européenne.
With our next sequence to take a look at the European strategy and see how the agency in Bilbao can help us in that. We're going to welcome two speakers. However, before I do so, over to Naples. Naples, well known to EUROGIP audience.
Regarde Napo et on se retrouve après.